The auction hall smelled of oil, smoke, and despair. Hundreds of eyes, human, alien, and machine, gleamed in the dim light as the bidding master called out the next lot. Shackled creatures shuffled forward under the harsh glare of the overhead beams. Some were broken, heads bowed in submission. Others snarled defiantly, their fury earning jeers from the crowd. But none of them compared to the last. When the doors creaked open and the guards dragged her in, the hall seemed to shrink. She was taller than most humans, her skin a deep, burnished silver that caught the light in strange, shifting hues. Her hair fell like a dark mane across her back, wild and unkempt. And her eyes, molten amber, burned with such hatred that even the auctioneer hesitated before speaking. "The untamable one," he announced with forced bravado. "The last of the Zarkai line. She has killed 3 handlers and crippled 6 others. No master has ever claimed her. No chain has ever truly bound her. But today she will belong to the highest bidder." Laughter rippled through the hall, but it was nervous laughter tinged with unease. No one missed the way she strained against her restraints, muscles taut, teeth bared. She didn't look defeated. She looked hungry. From the shadows of the back row, a man watched. His name was Kale, and unlike the others, he had not come to the auction for power or amusement. He wore no finery, no gaudy jewels. His coat was travel-worn, patched at the seams, and his hands were scarred from work, not luxury. To most, he looked like nothing, just another human drifter with no place in the galaxy's cruel hierarchy. But Kale's eyes never left the girl. When the bidding began, the room was hesitant. A few merchants tested the waters, throwing out numbers half-heartedly, more for the spectacle than with any intent to win. Each time, the Zarkai girl jerked at her chains, snarling, and the bidders quickly fell silent. The auctioneer's smile faltered. He tried to stir enthusiasm, shouting her supposed worth, her rarity, her strength, but the crowd was unconvinced. Owning her meant courting death. And so, the bidding dwindled. "Very well," the auctioneer said, voice strained. "Do I hear any final offers? Any at all?" The hall was silent. Then Kale spoke. "1 credit." The words were soft, almost lost beneath the murmurs, but the auctioneer snapped his head toward the source. The crowd erupted in laughter, sharp, derisive. "1 credit?" someone scoffed. "For a beast that'll rip his throat out within the hour?" But no one else countered. The auctioneer's face flushed with humiliation. He had expected a spectacle, riches. Instead, he had failure. But rules were rules, and a bid was a bid. With a bitter twist of his mouth, he slammed the gavel down. "Sold for 1 credit." The chains were shoved into Kale's hands. The crowd jeered, throwing insults, wagering how long he would last. Some even followed as the guards shoved the girl into his custody, eager to see her tear him apart before he could leave the station. But she didn't move. Not yet. Her eyes bore into him, molten fury burning hotter by the second. Kale said nothing. He led her through the corridor, past rusted doors and flickering lights, until they reached the hangar bay where his ship waited, an old freighter, patched and ugly, but reliable. The crowd trailed at a distance, eager to watch the bloodshed. When the ramp closed behind them and silence fell, she finally spoke. "You're a fool." Her voice was low, guttural, like stone grinding against stone. "Do you know what I am? Do you know what I will do to you?" Kale looked at her, calm, almost tired. "Yes." That caught her off guard. For a moment, her fury wavered, replaced by confusion. "And yet," he continued, "I paid for you." Her lip curled. "To own me." He shook his head. "To free you." The word struck like a lash. She laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Free me? Do you think I am some broken pet longing for kindness? You think I will kneel to you because you loosen my chains?" Kale stepped closer. Her muscles tensed, but he did not flinch. He reached to the console by the wall, pressed a sequence, and the restraints around her wrists and ankles clattered to the floor. The moment she was free, she lunged. Her hand closed around his throat with terrifying strength, lifting him from the ground. His feet kicked against the deck, his face reddened as she squeezed. "You are weak," she hissed. "Fragile bones. Soft flesh. 1 twist and you die. Why would you give me this chance?" Kale gasped, struggling for air, but his gaze never wavered. "Because I don't want a slave. I want an ally." Her grip tightened. "Ally? You." He forced the words through clenched teeth. I want to destroy the slavers. All of them. And I can't do it alone. The silence that followed was heavier than the void outside. Slowly, she loosened her grip, letting him drop to the floor. He coughed, clutching his throat, but when he looked up at her, there was no hatred, only resolve. She studied him, amber eyes narrowing. You would destroy the Empire? The chains that bind half the galaxy? You think you can? I don't think, he rasped. I know, and I know I can't do it without you. Her laugh returned, but softer this time, laced with disbelief. You are mad. Maybe. He stood, wiping the blood from his lip. But I'd rather die mad than live as property. For the first time, her expression shifted. Not much, just a flicker, a spark of something other than rage. She turned away, pacing the narrow deck, muscles coiled tight as if fighting herself. Finally, she stopped. You would risk your life. For strangers. For those already broken. What? Kale met her gaze steadily. Because someone has to. The words hung in the air, simple yet unshakable. And in that moment, she saw something she had never seen in the others who claimed ownership over her. Not arrogance, not cruelty, not fear. Conviction. She folded her arms, head tilting slightly. You have no army, no fleet, no allies. Only this rusted shell of a ship and your fragile bones. You will fail. Maybe, he admitted. But I'd rather fight and fail than do nothing. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but not a snarl either. You are reckless, suicidal, and perhaps more dangerous than you look. The crowd outside had long since dispersed, disappointed that no blood was spilled. Inside, in the quiet belly of the freighter, something fragile and impossible began to take root. She did not agree to help him. Not yet. But she did not kill him either. And for Kale, that was enough. When the ship lifted from the station, leaving the stench of the auction hall behind, the galaxy did not yet know it had just witnessed its first fracture. The chains that bound worlds would soon tremble. And it began with a human who bought an untamable girl, not to own her, but to set her free. The freighter slipped into the cold dark between stars, its engines humming like a tired animal. Kale sat at the controls, hands steady, eyes locked on the endless void. Behind him, the alien girl paced. She had not given her name, nor had he asked. She was a storm barely contained within skin, and to prod her now would only earn his death. But silence could not last forever. Where are we going, human? She asked finally, her voice sharp with impatience. Kale flicked a switch, the starlines of hyperspace stretching before them. To the rim. Outpost where the Empire's grip is weakest. She snorted. Weakest does not mean gone. Even the edges are shackled. You will find no safety. I'm not looking for safety, he said. That earned him a long stare. She tilted her head, as if trying to decipher what manner of creature he truly was. Then what are you looking for? Hope, Kale replied simply. And others like you. Fighters. Survivors. Those who would rather burn than kneel. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. You think to rally an army? From broken slaves and cowards who have never tasted victory. Yes, he said. She bared her teeth, almost a grin. You are insane. Probably. He adjusted a dial, unconcerned by her scorn. But empires fall the same way walls do. One crack at a time. Her eyes flickered with something he could not name. Not belief, but not dismissal either. She fell silent, retreating to the back of the ship where she folded herself onto the deck, a predator watching its prey. Hours passed. Days. The freighter skimmed the edges of lawless sectors where smugglers and pirates carved their own kingdoms. It was in one such place, the mining colony of Ral 10, that Kale made his move. The colony was little more than a scar cut into an asteroid, tunnels drilled deep into rock where laborers toiled until they collapsed. The Empire's overseers kept watch from steel towers, their whips replaced by shock staves and drones. Kale docked quietly, blending with the steady traffic of haulers. The girl followed him down the ramp, unchained now, but radiating menace so fierce that dockworkers shrank back at the sight of her. This is your plan? She asked, her voice dripping with disdain. To walk into the jaws of the beast with no army, no weapons, no strategy? Kale smiled faintly. I have a strategy, just not one you'll like. He walked straight into the heart of the colony, where miners shuffled under guard. He did not whisper, did not hide. His voice carried as he spoke to the first group he saw. You don't have to live like this. The miners froze. Guards turned, hands tightening on their staves. The girl's eyes widened, then narrowed, as Kale stepped closer. You think the Empire can't be broken, he continued. That their chains are forever. But they aren't. All it takes is one spark, one fire, and everything they've built will burn. A guard strode forward, snarling. Enough, off-worlder. Back to your ship before you regret opening your mouth. Kale didn't move. His gaze swept the miners, his voice rising. You're not slaves because you're weak. You're slaves because they've convinced you to believe it. But I've seen the truth. You're stronger than they are. You endure. You survive. And if you rise together, nothing in this galaxy can stop you. The guard swung his staff. The blow never landed. The alien girl caught it mid-strike, her hand clamped around the weapon like iron. With a twist, she ripped it from his grip and sent him sprawling. The other guards surged forward, but she met them with a roar. Chains might once have bound her, but now her fury was unshackled. She moved like a storm given flesh. Bones cracked, metal screamed, and within moments the guards lay broken at her feet. The miners stared, wide-eyed, as she stood over the wreckage, chest heaving. And then, slowly, impossibly, they began to cheer. It started as a whisper, then a murmur, then a roar that shook the tunnels. For the first time in years, the sound was not of despair, but defiance. Kale turned to her. She glared back, breathing hard, her expression unreadable. You used me, she growled. No, Kale said softly. I showed them what you are. A spark. A fire. She bared her teeth, ready to lash out. But then she saw the miners, their eyes shining with hope they thought they had forgotten. She saw how they looked at her, not as a beast, not as a weapon, but as something greater. Her anger faltered, just for a moment. Later, as they slipped back toward the freighter with a handful of freed miners in tow, she confronted him again. You risked everything today, for strangers who owe you nothing. Do you have a death wish? Kale shook his head. I don't want to die. I want to live in a galaxy where no one has to kneel. Don't you? Her silence was answer enough. When they reached the ship, one of the miners, a thin, wiry man with burns along his arms, stepped forward. What you said, if you're truly going to fight them, I'll fight too. Kale nodded. Then you're welcome aboard. The girl watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. When Kale turned to her, she crossed her arms. You are a fool, she said again. But this time her tone was different. Quieter, almost grudging. Kale only smiled. The freighter lifted off once more, carrying not just two unlikely companions, but the first embers of rebellion. The galaxy had not yet noticed. The Empire had not yet felt the shift. But in the darkness between stars, something new was awakening. And the untamable girl, once convinced of his madness, began to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, this fragile human's fire might burn hotter than even her own. The freighter drifted at the edge of a dying star system, its hull rattling with every course correction. Inside, the new recruits sat in silence, uncertain and wary. They were miners, not soldiers, their bodies marked by years of toil and cruelty. They had chosen freedom, but freedom demanded more than words. Kale worked tirelessly, repairing systems, plotting routes, gathering what little intelligence he could from the scattered channels of smugglers and traders. He spoke to the recruits often, not with grand speeches, but with quiet certainty, planting seeds of courage in soil long starved of it. The girl watched, always watched. She had seen leaders before, slavers, warlords, chieftains who commanded with terror and blood. Kale was different. He had no aura of dominance, no desire to be worshipped. He was breakable, weak by any warrior's standard. Yet when he spoke, they listened, not because they feared him, but because they believed him. It unsettled her. Late one cycle, when the others slept, she confronted him in the cockpit. You gather strays, she said, leaning against the frame, her amber eyes glowing in the dim light. Broken tools of the Empire. What use are they? They will falter in battle. They will die. Kale didn't turn from the console. Then they'll die free. Her jaw tightened. That matters to you. It should matter to everyone, he said. Then he looked at her, his gaze steady despite the exhaustion lining his face. Doesn't it matter to you? She wanted to answer with mockery, with scorn, but the word caught in her throat. She turned away instead, her silence more telling than any insult. Their first true test came sooner than Kale expected. A slaver convoy cut through the rim, hauling prisoners from one colony to another. It was guarded by 2 frigates and a dozen escorts. Nothing compared to the Empire's full strength, but more than enough to annihilate Kale's ragged freighter and handful of miners. Yet he gave the order anyway. The recruits panicked. Voices rose in fear, warning him of certain death. The girl almost laughed at his audacity. But Kale's voice cut through the chaos. They think no one will ever challenge them. That's why we have to. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now. The battle was chaos. Kale flew like a man possessed, weaving the battered freighter through storms of fire. The miners manned makeshift guns, their aim clumsy but fierce. The girl moved among them like a blade, cutting down boarding parties with a ferocity that turned fear into awe. But it was not enough. One of the frigates locked onto them, its cannons glowing with deadly light. The freighter shuddered under the first barrage, alarms screaming. Kale didn't hesitate. He veered straight toward the frigate, engines burning at maximum. The recruits shouted in terror, convinced he had gone mad. Even the girl braced herself for the end. At the last second, Kale twisted the freighter into a dive, skimming along the frigate's hull so close the shields crackled around them. He triggered the last of their cargo, stolen mining charges rigged as bombs, and the explosion ripped open the frigate's spine. The ship bucked, debris tearing past, but when the fire cleared, the slaver frigate was breaking apart. The second frigate retreated, dragging its escorts with it. And the convoy was theirs. Silence filled the freighter, broken only by the ragged breaths of those who had survived. Then came the cheering, raw, disbelieving, triumphant. They had faced the Empire and lived. More than that, they had won. The girl stood at Kale's side, staring at him as if seeing him for the first time. His hands still shook from the strain, his face pale with exhaustion. He was fragile, yes, breakable. But when others fled, he charged. When logic screamed surrender, he found a way to strike. She spoke quietly, so only he could hear. You should be dead. Any sane being would be dead. Kale gave a weary smile. Maybe I'm not sane. Her lips curved into something caught between a snarl and a smile. No, you're worse. You're human. The prisoners from the convoy filled their ship, their chains cut, their voices raised in disbelief and gratitude. For the first time, Kale's small band became something larger, a movement. Word would spread. It always did. That night, when the stars wheeled silently outside the viewport, the girl sat alone in the cargo hold, watching the freed slaves huddle together. She remembered the auction block, the laughter of her captors, the certainty that her spirit would be caged forever. And she remembered the human who had bought her, not to bind her, but to fight beside her. She clenched her fists, unsettled by the heat in her chest. He was reckless, foolish, everything she despised. And yet, when he looked at the impossible, he did not see defeat. He saw a path. For the first time in her life, she wondered if perhaps he was not the fool at all. The rebellion spread like a fever through the dark veins of the galaxy. Each freed convoy became a dozen more voices shouting for liberty. Each slaver defeated left cracks in the Empire's armor. And each crack widened, no matter how fiercely the overseers tried to patch it. Kale's name began to travel. At first, only whispers. A human captain with nothing but a rusted freighter and a band of escaped slaves, striking where no sane commander would dare. Then louder, bolder, until in backroom cantinas and hidden cells, his name became a promise. Some called him reckless, some called him doomed, but all agreed on one thing. He was dangerous, because he made others believe they could win. The alien girl, once silent in her contempt, now walked at his side. She still mocked him in private, calling him fragile, soft, doomed to break. But she no longer threatened to kill him. And though she had not admitted it aloud, she had given him her name, Solara. They clashed often. When Kale spoke of mercy, she argued for ruthlessness. When he sought alliances, she scoffed that weakness only slowed them. Yet in battle, they moved as one, her fury the blade, his will the hand that guided it. One night, after a raid that left a prison moon burning, they stood on the deck watching the freed swarm into transports bound for safer worlds. Kale's shoulders sagged with exhaustion, his eyes haunted by the faces of those they couldn't save. You carry their ghosts, Solara said, her tone not unkind. They deserve to be carried, Kale murmured. She studied him, her amber eyes catching the starlight. Most commanders count victories. You count the dead. I count both, he said. Because every number matters. Her jaw tightened. Once, she would have called him weak. Now she only looked away, unsettled by the ache in her chest. The Empire did not stay blind. Their patrols doubled, then tripled. Bounties on Kale's head soared across star systems. At last, a fleet was dispatched, not convoys, not escorts, but warships meant to erase him from history. The ambush came at the edge of a barren world. Kale's ragtag flotilla, a few stolen freighters, a handful of retrofitted haulers, was no match for Imperial cruisers. When the enemy emerged from hyperspace, the stars vanished behind walls of steel. Panic rippled through the rebels. Some screamed to flee, others froze in terror. Kale's voice cut through the chaos. Hold the line. They obeyed, not because it was wise, but because his certainty anchored them. The battle was fire and ruin. Their ships buckled, their weapons sputtered, and still they fought. Solara tore through boarding parties with a savagery that made even seasoned rebels stare in awe. Kale pushed the freighter to its limits, flying so close to enemy fire that the hull glowed red. But even defiance has limits. One by one, rebel ships fell. Flames bloomed in the void, carrying with them voices that would never shout again. At the height of the slaughter, the flagship's cannons locked onto Kale's freighter. The blast would have ended them, but Kale didn't retreat. He swung the freighter into a desperate dive, drawing the flagship's guns away from the last surviving transports. Kale! Solara roared, gripping the rail as alarms screamed. You'll kill us. If it saves them, he shot back, it's worth it. The blast struck. The freighter shook apart, fire racing through its hull. For a moment, it seemed the end had come. But the explosion they expected never claimed them fully. The freighter, crippled and smoking, still held together by stubbornness and luck. Solara dragged Kale from the console, his face bloodied, his breath ragged. Fury and terror twisted inside her, a storm she did not know how to name. You would throw your life away, she snarled. For them. For anyone. Do you think you are infinite, human? Do you think you cannot die? He coughed, smiling faintly even through the pain. I think if I die so they can live, it's a good trade. Something broke inside her then. Not anger, not disdain, but something deeper. For so long she had called him weak. But now she understood, it was not weakness. It was strength she had never known. The strength to give, even when nothing was left. When the battle finally ended, when the Empire's fleet limped away, harried by rebel reinforcements drawn by Kale's desperate call, Solara stood in the wreckage of the freighter and looked down at him. For the first time, she was afraid. Not of chains, not of death, but of losing the human who had bought her freedom with his own blood. She did not speak the words then. She was not ready. But as she bound his wounds with hands that trembled more than she liked, she whispered low, so only he might hear if he still clung to consciousness. You are mine now, Kale. Not as master, not as slave. But if you fall, I fall too. And though he did not answer, she swore she saw the faintest smile on his lips. The galaxy shook as the rebellion grew teeth. What began as whispers in dark corners now blazed across entire sectors. Slaves rioted in their pens. Overseers vanished into alleys and never returned, and convoys once untouchable burned in the void. The Empire called it a nuisance, a flicker of chaos to be stamped out. But their denials couldn't smother the truth. The fire was spreading, and its heart was a fragile human with a battered freighter. Kale walked slower now, his body carrying the scars of too many battles. His hands sometimes shook when he thought no one was looking, and Solara noticed every time. She noticed the way he forced himself upright, the way he hid his pain behind thin smiles. He was no immortal hero. He was mortal, breakable, and that made his defiance sting all the sharper. The rebels gathered at an abandoned station orbiting a dead moon. Hundreds filled the hangars, voices echoing with resolve and fear in equal measure. They looked to Kale, though he had never claimed to be their leader. He stood before them, his coat torn, his face still bruised from the last fight, and spoke as if his voice alone could carry them across the abyss. The Empire believes its chains are unbreakable, he said, his voice steady though exhaustion shadowed his eyes. They believe fear will always silence us. But fear breaks. Chains break. Empires fall. They will tell you we are too few, too weak, too scattered. They will tell you humans are fragile, and Zarkai are beasts, and miners are slaves. But I tell you this, he raised a scarred hand. We are free, and the free cannot be conquered. A roar shook the hangar, 1,000 voices raised in defiance. Solara watched him, her heart pounding in a way battle had never stirred. When his gaze swept the crowd and landed on her, she didn't look away. For the first time, she felt the weight of something greater than war pressing against her chest. The Empire answered soon after. Not with whispers, not with bounties, but with war. They fortified their strongholds, locked their slave worlds in tighter chains, and sent fleets bristling with guns to crush the uprising before it could ignite beyond control. Kale's plan was madness, even by her standards. Strike the heart. Not the outposts, not the convoys, but the Empire's core stronghold. A fortress world where the slave markets never slept, where billions of credits flowed like blood, where every chain in the galaxy began its link. Impossible, Solara said when he laid it out. That world is guarded by fleets larger than every ship we command combined. It is suicide. Kale only leaned forward, his voice low and certain. That's why they'll never expect us to try. And so they did. The rebel fleet emerged from hyperspace in a storm of light. Old freighters, stolen frigates, ships held together by faith and spit, but together they filled the void with fire. The Empire's defenses roared awake, warships descending like wolves. Solara led the charge on the ground, tearing through the markets with a fury that made slavers scatter. Chains shattered, cages burst open, and the once silent pens erupted with cries of freedom. She fought as she always had, but this time something was different. Every blow, every strike, she thought of him. She thought of his voice, his fire, his maddening, fragile heart. In orbit, Kale drove the fleet like a man possessed. The rebels bled, ships burned, but they pushed harder, striking where no commander dared, weaving through the enemy lines with reckless brilliance. Every time the fleet faltered, his voice steadied them. Every time the Empire pressed, he found a path no one else could see. But the cost was heavy. His ship, their ship, took hit after hit until smoke filled the decks and fire crawled along its veins. Solara felt it, even planetside, as if her own chest had been struck. She tore through enemies with renewed savagery, desperate to reach him. At last, the fortress gates fell. The slave markets burned, overseers fled, and the Empire's symbol of dominance crumbled into ash. Across the galaxy, the chains shivered and broke. Worlds rose in rebellion, no longer afraid. The Empire was not eternal. It was bleeding, but Kale did not see the victory. He lay in the wreckage of the freighter, blood soaking his coat, his breath shallow. When Solara found him, her fury shattered into something rawer, something she could no longer deny. She dropped to her knees, her hands shaking as they pressed against his wounds. "Do not leave me, human," she whispered fiercely, amber eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. "You cannot die now. Not after this. Not after stealing my fire and my heart." His lips curved faintly, even through the pain. "Told you we could break them." Her chest ached with something deeper than rage, deeper than battle. For so long she had laughed at him, called him weak, mocked his fragile bones. But now, holding him against the backdrop of their impossible victory, she understood. His weakness was his strength, and it had become hers, too. The Empire had fallen. The galaxy trembled, and in the quiet after the storm, Solara bowed her head, pressing her forehead to his. "You are mine, Kale," she whispered, "and I am yours. Not by chains, not by war, but by choice." And in that moment, as the fires of rebellion lit the stars, the untamable alien girl and the fragile human stood together, not as master and slave, not as allies of necessity, but as something far greater. Together, they had broken an empire, and together, they would build something new.